What happened? A man was crushed between two trucks, yet he still smiled at the camera. A young man had his air supply cut off at a depth of nearly 100 meters in the pitch black depths of the sea and still managed to survive and return. A 10-year-old boy fell into a 35-meter deep concrete shaft, and all cries for help suddenly went silent amid the desperate efforts of hundreds of people. These three true stories are not only strange, but they also challenge every limit of luck, willpower, and even fate. If you think you've heard enough near-death or tragic stories in your life, then the next 15 minutes will leave you holding your breath, unable to look away until the very last second. Hello, I'm Mr. High, a 90-year-old man who loves telling strange, dark, and mysterious stories. If you want to keep hearing true stories that make your heart beat faster than usual, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell. That will give me more motivation to tell you things that you might never believe are real. The man was crushed between two trucks, yet he still smiled at the camera. Let me repeat, this is a strange story, not a funny one. 4:45 a.m., Saturday, January 17th, 2015. Interstate I-84 near Baker City, Oregon, was eerily silent. The sky was pitch black, the cold wind stabbing through layers of clothing like needles. The road was coated with a thin layer of ice, slick as glass. Fog wrapped around the view, turning everything ahead into a solid wall of white. This was the kind of weather every driver feared the most, but 27-year-old Caleb Whitby still had to drive. His family was waiting for a cattle delivery that morning. There was no other choice. He drove his Chevrolet pickup truck, keeping his speed slower than usual, eyes fixed on the road. 10 minutes later, the taillights of a white semi-truck appeared ahead. It was moving slowly, far too slowly. Caleb began to grow impatient. He considered overtaking. But then, the headlights reflected off a warning sign, a sharp curve just a few hundred meters away. Slippery road, limited visibility. Overtaking now would be nothing short of asking for disaster. Caleb eased off the gas, waiting to get past the bend. The semi disappeared around the curve. Caleb steered into it, and immediately, everything before his eyes turned into an unbelievable sight. The highway was blocked by a massive pileup. More than 20 cars and trucks stacked on top of one another, shattered glass sparkling in the headlights, white steam from boiling radiators mixing with the fog. Caleb felt the blood in his body run cold. He slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched sharply against the ice. The pickup skidded sideways and slammed straight into the side of the semi ahead. The impact jolted him forward, everything shaking violently. Then, an even more terrifying sound came from behind, low, heavy, and fast. Another semi plowed straight into the rear of his truck. Steel crushed steel, the screeching grind raising goosebumps. In an instant, Caleb was pinned between two masses of steel weighing tens of tons. The space around him shrank, his breathing grew rapid. A few minutes later, a third semi-truck also entered that curve. This driver reacted in time, swerving to lightly hit the guardrail before coming to a complete stop. He stepped out. In front of him was a scene like a battlefield. Vehicles piled on top of one another, the smell of burning rubber and engine oil mixing with the fog, headlights flickering chaotically in the dead silence. Then, a faint sound. Not an engine, not metal, a human voice. Weak, as if coming from somewhere within the heap of twisted steel. The driver followed the sound, stepping over bent metal panels, avoiding shards of glass as sharp as knives. And then he stopped. Right before his eyes, inside a cab crushed and deformed beyond recognition, a man was still alive. Caleb. His eyes were wide open, his face smeared with blood, but his mind was clear. Strangely enough, the very impact had created a small space just large enough for his body, a fragile pocket of air that was keeping him alive. The third truck driver pulled out his phone and captured the moment that would later spread across the United States. Then he bent down, trying to pull Caleb out through a narrow gap. When Caleb was finally freed, the astonishing truth became clear. Aside from a few bruises and scratches, he had no serious injuries. When rescue crews arrived, they confirmed a fact that left everyone stunned. In this pileup involving more than 20 vehicles, not a single person had died. In the darkness, ice, and chaos of that morning, life had found a way out, through a gap no wider than the span of two hands. Just imagine if the angle of impact had been different, if one of the trucks had been going just a few kilometers per hour faster, if Caleb had accelerated a single second earlier, then the photograph taken that day would have been his last, and this story would never be told the way it is now. But it happened. And Caleb Whitby became living proof of the thin line between death and a second chance. If you were Caleb, after surviving in such a strange way, would you A. Return to your old rhythm of life, continuing as if nothing had happened? B. Completely change your way of living, treating each day as a gift and cherishing every minute? Leave A or B in the comments and tell me your reason. Let's say Caleb's story was pure luck. Then the second story, in my opinion, is impossible. There is no science that can explain it. It can only be called deeply mysterious. A man lay motionless on the floor of the North Sea for more than 30 minutes, his oxygen tank completely empty, the seawater near freezing at almost 0 degrees Celsius. And then he returned to shore in perfectly normal condition. Would you believe it? September 2012, the North Sea, frigid, fierce waters between the United Kingdom and Norway. This place is infamous not only for its storms, but also for a profession in which even the smallest mistake means you'll never return to the surface. Saturation diving. It's a job that sends humans to terrifying depths, where the pressure is enough to crush your lungs if you try to ascend too quickly. And on a pitch-black night in the middle of that ocean, a man found himself in a situation where nearly every survival rule said he should be dead. Chris Lemons, 32, along with two colleagues, Dave and Duncan, were working aboard a vessel that supported oil rig maintenance. On September 12th, their mission was to descend to a depth of 330 feet, about the height of a 30-story building, to inspect and repair part of the oil platform structure. The weather was rough. High waves, strong winds, but orders from the ship were clear. They would dive. Duncan stayed inside the diving bell, while Chris and Dave went out. When the bottom hatch of the bell opened, they were met with a thick, impenetrable blackness. The water was near 0 degrees Celsius. No light except the lamps attached to their helmets, and the only sound was the steady breathing through the regulator. They moved along the massive steel frame of the rig, working under instructions relayed from Duncan through the comms. In this environment, everything depended on a single lifeline, the umbilical, supplying air, heat, light, and communication. An hour passed. On the surface, the captain realized something was wrong. The vessel's dynamic positioning system had failed. The ship began to drift. Within minutes, the backup system also failed. Waves and wind pushed the ship away, pulling the diving bell and the divers below along with it. Over the radio, the coordinator's voice came through. Urgent and firm. Abort the job. Return to the bell immediately. Dave climbed up first. His umbilical cable stretched tight, but was just long enough for him to get past the steel frame and reach the bell. Chris wasn't so lucky. His umbilical had looped over a crossbar of the rig. The farther the ship drifted, the tighter the cable pulled. He tugged, twisted, tried to free it. No use. Duncan radioed in. "We're out of slack. Can't give you any more." The tension on the line increased rapidly. Chris's entire body was yanked backward, so hard his spine shuddered. The umbilical cord was stretched taut, like a guitar string about to snap, pulling his head back. His hand slipped on the freezing steel beam as he tried to crawl forward, but each time he moved just a few centimeters, the cable tightened even more. Duncan's voice came urgently through the headset. "That's it, Chris. You've got to free yourself." Chris turned his head, the light from his helmet sweeping across the steel beams of the rig. They were interlocked like a trap, and the umbilical was wrapped tightly around one crossbar, vibrating as if warning that something was about to happen. He reached down, tried to yank it free. No luck. The steel had bitten deep into the rubber casing of the cable, tightening until his hands went numb. The cold from the seawater seeped into his gloves, crawled up his wrists, and into his arms. And then it happened. A sharp, dry pop exploded right next to his ear, making his eardrums vibrate. The umbilical snapped. In an instant, everything vanished. The voices of his teammates, the pale yellow glow from his helmet light, the warmth from the heating system. Chris sank into pitch blackness, cold so deep it felt like it could swallow even his last thought. The backup tank on his back automatically kicked in, but he knew it would only last a few minutes. His heart pounded wildly. Fear and adrenaline made him breathe faster, burning through what little oxygen he had left. He stood there, feeling his body grow heavier as the cold water pressed into every muscle. There was no clear direction, no point of light to aim for. Chris began to walk. Every step was a gamble. The darkness erased all sense of distance. He could be just a few meters from the edge of the rig or right above an endless drop. His breathing rasped inside the mask, each inhale feeling like a blade dragging through his chest. 1 minute passed, then 2. The pressure in his chest mounted. Then, in the endless black, his hand touched something hard and cold, steel framework. He gripped it, feeling his way upward. His hands trembled, unsure if it was from the cold or the fear. Reaching the top of the rig, he hoped to see the light from the bell. But there was nothing. Only dark, icy water, without a single glimmer, without a single sound. The oxygen in his tank ran low. He sank to his knees, gripping the steel bar as a final instinct to hold on to life. His breathing turned heavy, short and shallow. It felt as though an invisible hand was squeezing his chest. Then, everything went silent. His body went slack. And Chris didn't know if he would ever open his eyes again. On the ship, the captain knew that if they couldn't get the vessel back in position immediately, Chris would remain forever at the bottom of the sea. He took the risky move of shutting down all systems and rebooting them in the middle of the rough ocean, something no captain ever wanted to attempt. But the system came back online. The dynamic positioning locked on, guiding the ship back to its exact anchor point. Dave immediately left the bell and rushed to find his teammate. When Dave found Chris, he had been motionless for at least 20 minutes. The water was so cold that his joints were stiff, his limbs locked in place. Dave hauled him back to the bell, his hands as cold as iron. Inside the pressurized chamber, Duncan pulled off Chris's helmet, pressed his mouth to his, and breathed for him. Once, twice. Suddenly, Chris coughed violently. His eyes shot open. His skin shifted from pale blue to pink. In that cramped chamber, the three men clung to each other, laughing and shaking, hardly believing they had just pulled someone back from the hands of death. Back on the surface, the doctor examined him. No brain damage, no lung injury. Just a few weeks later, Chris returned to work at the very same sea that had nearly taken his life. To this day, no one has a certain answer for how he survived more than 30 minutes without breathing. The most plausible explanation? The cold had slowed his heartbeat and oxygen consumption, keeping him alive far beyond any known medical limit. The final image from the remotely operated camera, showing Chris lying still at the top of the rig, remains as a reminder that some days you don't understand why you're still here. But you know for sure it's a gift no one gets twice. Even now, I'm still haunted by the feeling of being trapped in the heart of the ocean. If it were you, if you were Chris, how would you feel? For nearly 100 hours, 350 people worked through the night to rescue a boy who had fallen into a 35-meter-deep concrete pillar in Dong Thap Province, Vietnam. However, no miracle occurred. The boy had passed away. December 31st, 2022. Roc Sen Bridge construction site, Phu Loi Commune, Thang Binh District, Dong Thap Province. That noon, amid the mixed sounds of machinery and the chatter of workers preparing lunch, a little girl suddenly came running, breathless, her face pale. "Uncle, someone fell into the concrete hole." No one had time to ask anything. Do Antoine M., 34, dropped his chopsticks and sprinted across the muddy ground, several others following close behind. The soft mud underfoot made squelching sounds, each step feeling slower under the weight of rising fear. In the middle of the chaotic construction site, with steel rods and towering concrete piles all around, they found a pitch-black round hole, its opening barely wider than a handspan. He bent down, shouting loudly, "Where are you, kid?" From deep below, a trembling child's voice echoed back, "Uncle, I'm down here. Please pull me up." In that moment, the entire space seemed frozen. No one could believe it. A concrete pile casing only about 25 centimeters in diameter, over 35 meters deep, and a child was trapped inside, wedged between the icy walls of concrete and darkness. Tuan M reassured him, "Wait for me," then ran to find a rope. A few other workers threw down a coil of rope. "How Nam, grab on! We'll pull you up!" shouts echoed across the site. The rope went taut, then suddenly slack. A lump caught in his throat as Tuanem quickly called out, "Hang on, don't be scared." Then he rushed off to gather more workers for help. They lowered the rope again, yelling, "Hold on tight to the rope." Once, twice, then the rope shook faintly and suddenly slipped free. No more grip, no more reply. At that exact moment, the boy had slipped to the bottom, 35 meters down. Tuanem immediately ran to the commune health station to grab an oxygen tank, returned and pumped air down the hole, while another man sped off on a motorbike to alert the police. Just 5 minutes later, Captain Nguyen Phuong Hong and Officer Dang Van Jiang arrived. But a chilling silence had already taken hold. They continued lowering oxygen lines, calling out, listening, but the bottom of the hole answered only with cold emptiness. About 20 minutes later, professional rescue teams arrived, all eyes fixed on the mouth of the concrete pile, a deep darkness with no visible end. Mud clung to the walls, and the damp, suffocating smell rose up as if swallowing every last hope. When Hao Nam's father, Tai Van Tan Tai, arrived, he knelt by the edge of the hole, his voice trembling. "It's Dad. The uncles are coming to save you. Hang in there, son." But about 10 minutes later, there was no more cry for help, only a suffocating silence. And then an unprecedented rescue operation for this rural area began. More than 350 people, workers, police officers, doctors, and rescue forces, took turns standing by 24/7. Large drilling machines were brought in from all over, the sound of metal cutting into concrete echoing through the night. Floodlights lit up the entire site, shadows of people hurrying back and forth, cables, oxygen lines, mud pumps, all tangled together like one giant machine with a single purpose, to pull the boy out of the hole. With each passing hour, the pressure mounted. The ground around the concrete pile was drilled and cut, earth and rock dug up one shovelful at a time. Every sound that echoed from deep underground made everyone hold their breath, clinging to the faint hope that it was a sign of life. But the thick, sludgy mud kept sliding down, blocking every attempt. The air below had long since thinned, and time was running out. At times, engineers were forced to pause because the drill shaft shook violently, risking a collapse of the hole walls. But after just a few minutes of stopping, someone would urge, "Hurry up! The boy doesn't have much time." Bloodshot eyes from lack of sleep, hands raw and bleeding from holding shovels and picks for hours. Everyone shared the same conviction: we have to save him. For days, this construction site never slept. On the night of January 3rd into the morning of January 4th, 2023, the temperature dropped, the fog grew thick, but no one left their post. Teams rotated in shifts, steadily digging deeper and cutting through the soil around the concrete pile. Then, on the afternoon of January 4th, the chairman of the Dong Thap Provincial People's Committee stepped in front of dozens of cameras. His voice grew heavy.
Dưới hố, rồi em mới chạy hô lên là bên kia nó ở dưới xà lan, nó mới đem dây lên nó thả xuống đó. Rồi ăn cái có ba bé kia chạy vô, một bé gái chạy vô hỏi vậy đó, kêu em là chú ơi, ấy là có con bé lọt phía sông rồi kìa, lọt dưới hố. Rồi em mới chạy hô lên là bên kia nó ở dưới xà lan, nó mới đem dây lên nó thả xuống đó.
The forensic, medical, and local authorities have worked together to assess. The conditions for sustaining the victim's life have ended. We have clear evidence showing that the boy has passed away. In the crowd, Hao Nam's mother froze for a few seconds, then collapsed. Her wailing tore through the heavy air. Those around her, even the burliest construction workers, had to turn away to wipe their tears. The search continued until they could bring his body up for the family to hold a funeral. But for those who were there, the image of that dark concrete shaft and the faint, trembling cry from that fateful noon would haunt them for the rest of their lives. If you have never witnessed it, you will never truly understand the feeling when a small life slips away right before your eyes, while around you is a sea of people willing to do anything, yet still powerless. It is not just pain. It is emptiness. It is the question, what if, that will forever haunt everyone who was there. For me, the most terrifying thing was not the deep hole or the darkness underground. It was the moment that faint voice went silent and you realized you would never hear it again. I don't know if somewhere, How Nam could hear the voices calling his name from above the mouth of that hole. But I hope, if he could, he would know that an entire world tried to save him. Thank you for staying until the very end to hear this story. I'm Mr. High, a 90-year-old man. If you want to keep hearing strange, dark, and mysterious stories like this, please hit the subscribe button so I'll have more motivation to share them with you in future videos.